Welcome. This is part 2 of a two-part module, which will guide you through creating employee SSIDs and IP networks for Aerohive routers and branch offices. In this section, I will demonstrate how user profile policies and IP networks are assigned to an SSID, as well as show you how to define specific subnets for Aerohive routers at branch sites. Here you can see the SSID profile name, and below it the actual SSID that is advertised, and you can also see the access security setting for this SSID. Now that the new SSID has been added, an Add Remove link is now available under the user profile. You will need to add a user profile to define the user access policies for this SSID, which are assigned and enforced by the router. In the Choose User Profile dialog, I will create a new user profile. In a wireless and routing network policy, user profiles are assigned to network objects which define the VLAN, IP subnet, DHCP settings, DNS settings, and web security settings using WebSense or Barracuda Networks cloud services for clients that associate with the SSID or connect to a LAN port. Each user profile can be assigned as a one-to-one mapping with an SSID, or if you are using Aerohive's private PSK, radius authentication, or a feature called User Profile Reassignment, an attribute value can be returned after successful authentication to assign a user profile based on the user's group membership in their user directory like Active Directory, Open Directory, or LDAP, based on their private PSK group, or based on device type. This way, different groups of users can have different sets of policies even when they are connecting to the same SSID. You can have up to 64 different user profiles defined for a single SSID. Here, I will create a user profile called Branch Employees. Next, I will assign an attribute number value for this user profile. Next, I will assign an attribute number value. For this user profile, I will use an attribute number value of 10. The attribute number value has to be unique for a network policy, and I will usually make it the same as the VLAN that will be assigned in this user profile. When a client associates with an SSID, the Aerohive router or Aerohive AP behind the router keeps a mapping of this number along with the client information in order to identify the user profile policies that must be enforced. The router or APs pass the attribute numbers to neighboring APs as part of each client's session state, so that each AP or router knows the user profile policies that must be enforced as a client roams. Now I will click plus to create a new network assignment object. I will name the network BR for branch router, and then 172.16.00/16, which will be the network I will use for my branch sites. For each network and VLAN defined, HiveManager will automatically configure the router interfaces. VLAN 1 by default is used for the management network, so the user networks should use another VLAN. I will enter 10 for the VLAN. Next, I will need to specify a DNS service. You can select the default DNS service, which will be named the same name as your Hive name. The DNS service specifies which DNS servers clients should use that are connected to the router, and the IP addresses specified in this DNS policy will be provided in DHCP offers from the router. By default, the router will use its IP address to send to clients, and it will proxy DNS requests to the DNS server the router learns from its WAN interface. Next, the network type can either be set to internal use or guest use. Next, the network type can either be set to internal use, guest use, or management. If you specify internal use, every router at each branch office will be assigned a unique subnet, This is especially important if the router will be providing VPN service to the corporate network. If you specify guest use, a single subnet will be replicated to all branch sites, and devices assigned to the guest use subnet will not be permitted to access the corporate VPN. If you specify management, you can assign the network to be used for your router and VPN gateway management network. I will assign this network type to internal use, and then create a new subnetwork. The IP network specified here can be assigned to one branch office, or it can be a larger subnet that you divide into smaller subnets for each branch office. I like to use a /16 when possible, so that I can divide the network into many smaller networks that I can allocate to each branch site. Here, I will define a network 172.16.00/16. I will then use the slider bar to carve up the network into 256 branch offices. Each of my branch offices will be assigned a unique /24 subnet off the 172.16.00 network. At this time, the first IP address in a subnet is allocated to the Aerohive router. So for a /24 subnet, for example, the .1 address for a subnet will be assigned to each Aerohive router. Next, I will enable DHCP server service, and I will exclude 10 IP addresses at the start of the IP range and 10 at the end so I can use them for static IP addresses. Note that the options specified here are for the DHCP server. I will enter my company's domain name, ah-lab.com. This will be provided in the DHCP offer to clients. If I have devices that require custom options, I can enter the custom options here, but for this example, I do not. Next, we have a couple of different ways to ensure a specific site or group of sites get assigned to specific subnets. I can randomly assign a subnet to each site, or be more specific using a feature called device classification. I will demonstrate a simple device classification example to ensure every site gets a known subnet. This is optional. I will check the box to allocate subnetworks by specific IP addresses at sites. This states that an IP address specified here is reserved for a specific site, so HiveManager will allocate the subnet that includes the specified IP address to a specific branch router. I am using 256 branches with a /24 network mask, so I can enter the first IP address of a subnet and specify a router which will be assigned to that subnet. So the first IP address I will set is 172.16.1.1. For the type, I will specify device name, and then for the value, I will enter the host name of one of my routers. And now I can click Apply. To get the host names of your routers, you can keep this web page up, but then open another tab or window in your browser and go to the Monitor Routers page. The host name of the Aerohive devices by default are AH- the last 6 digits of their MAC address. I already have another tab open to that page. Here I can see all the host names of my routers. I will now go back to my configuration. I will repeat the same steps. For 3 of my other BR100s. And apply. Now, through the help of marketing magic, I have entered all my IP address to hostname mappings. I will not add the hostname of the BR200 so we can see how it gets assigned to one of the other subnets. Now I will save this network. You can expand IP allocation to see the settings you just made. Now I can save the network. With my network assigned, I will save the user profile. In the Choose User Profiles window, I will make sure that my user profile is selected and click Save. Now you can see the network and VLAN that will be assigned to the clients when they connect to this SSID. Here you can see that when a station connects to the Corp Wi-Fi SSID, they will be assigned to the branch employee user profile, which will assign a subnet from the BR 172.16.00/16 network. At this point, you can save and update the configuration of your router or add additional settings to your router. Note that after updating the configuration of your routers, if you go to Monitor Subnet Allocation, you can verify your subnets are allocated correctly. For the network name, I will select my BR 172.16.00/16 network. Here, I can see that the 4 routers I created specific subnets for were assigned correctly, and my BR200 that I did not create a specific subnet for was automatically generated one from the rest of the IP subnet pool. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. You can now proceed to the next video in the Getting Started series.